William Morrow and HarperAudio present The Queer Principles of Kit Webb, a novel by Cat Sebastian, performed by Joel Leslie. Since laws were made for every degree, to curb vice in others as well as me, I wonder we hadn't better company upon Tyburn tree. But gold from law can take out the sting, and if rich men like us were to swing, 'twould thin the land, such numbers to string upon Tyburn tree. John Gay, The Beggar's Opera, 1728. Chapter 1. November, 1751. Kit Webb had principles. He was certain of it, even at his worst, which had reliably been found at the bottom of a bottle. He hadn't hurt anyone, at least not too badly. Well, at least not on purpose. Better, perhaps, to say that he never threw the first punch. As far as daggers and pistols, he found waving them about to be so effective that he never needed to resort to using them. Better not to dwell on whether this owed more to luck than to any skill or moral refinement on his part. Yes, he had lightened a few purses in his day, but nobody whose purse wasn't altogether too heavy to begin with. He wasn't going to keep himself up at night, worrying about what some or another lady was going to do with one fewer ruby diadem. Besides, that diadem had been murder to fence, nearly put him off the entire enterprise of jewel theft altogether. Betty hadn't spoken to him for weeks. He much preferred coin, please and thank you. He did feel badly about the coachmen and outriders and other fools who got dragged into fights that were, properly, between Kit and the great and good of the land, but he figured that any poor sod who was fool enough to come between a highwayman and a gilt-encrusted travelling coach got whatever they had coming to them, which, as it turned out, tended to be nothing more than a couple of well-placed punches. But that was all in the past now, anyway. He had turned over a new leaf, started fresh, or as close to fresh as a man could when he was nearly 30, and all his acquaintances were criminals, and the back room of his place of business was little more than a house of assignation. As close to starting fresh as a man could get when 3 times a day some bastard walked past the coffee house singing that bloody fucking ballad about that one time he had escaped from prison. Yes, the escape had been dashing, but it wasn't even in the top 10% of his most impressive feats. And it was a sin and a shame that jail rhymed with so many words. Besides, his shoulder still hurt from where he had injured it in squeezing through the barred window, and the less said about the gunshot wound that had been allowed to fester during his week in prison, the better. And that ill-fated escape had followed hard upon Rob's death, which was not the sort of thing he wanted to be reminded of in lazily rhymed couplets. No, he probably didn't have principles at all, sorry to say, but he could act like he did. In fact, he had to act like it, seeing as how, with his leg in this state, he could hardly continue to merrily thieve his way across England. He was the very model of what the preacher in Hyde Park was pleased to call a virtuous life, and the boredom of it would probably kill him. For 12 months now, Kit had lived the life of an honest and respectable shopkeeper. He turned his attention to running the coffee house, which he had bought some years ago on a drunken whim, and then operated as little more than a convenient staging ground, a literal den of thieves. But these days, when a customer came in with a purse full of gold and a head full of cotton wool, they left, with both head and purse intact. And if the past year of trying to live a decent sort of life had only resulted in Kit getting more foul-tempered by the day, it was probably his own fault for being so very bad at being good. He had to try harder, that was all. Still, sometimes after walking Betty home after closing up at night, he almost wished footpads would come after him. He'd leap at the flimsiest excuse to fight back. Maybe that was why when something that looked like first-rate trouble walked into Kit's coffee house, Kit felt like a bloodhound who had finally scented its quarry.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?